A new political investigation is shining a light on the dark reality students are facing following a mass shooting.
Politico looked at the test scores of students at both Stoneman Douglas High School and Santa Fe High School. What they found was a serious drop in overall scores at both schools and an increase in the number of students visiting trauma counselors.
Joining us with more on her piece is Politico education reporter Nicole Gaudiano. Thank you so much, Nicole, for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Nicole, can you explain to our viewers what your investigation found?
Sure. I took a look at federal aid applications from both Broward County and Santa Fe. And I'd like to give credit to a colleague of mine, Caitlin Emma, who looked at these applications 5 years ago for Sandy Hook. And we thought that there would be an equally compelling and important story to tell about Broward and Santa Fe. And it turns out what we found were the similarities in all three instances. Declining test scores and mental issues, substance abuse. These communities are really reeling still.
And, you know, when I think of Parkland, as I understand it, excellent school, excellent district, these are kids that would have probably normally be scoring pretty high. Were they also acting out, you know, sort of responding to this trauma in that way?
Yes, I think there were increases in misconduct as well for both places. Sure.
So, Nicole, is this also impacting the students' academic performance?
That really stood out with Marjorie Stoneman Douglas in their presentation to the Department of Education. They noted something like a 20% decline in for seniors in English test scores, and they also looked at first-time takers of algebra tests. Those declined about 50%. So they noted that they were falling behind in their coursework, and part of the reason why they were requesting grant money was so that they could assist students after school with course recovery or credit recovery.
So I want to ask you a question about your process. What evidence were you able to uncover revealing this trend?
I'm sorry?
I want to ask you sort of about your process, because we've done stories on this and we've sort of anecdotally talked about the trauma, and often it's like right after the event, and we talk about how counselors have been brought in and maybe there's you know, animals brought in, and then it sort of just goes away, and the expectation is that, yes, some kids are impacted by this, but the rest of them sort of bounce back and go on. So it must have been, you know, a challenge to find some sort of concrete evidence, quantifiable evidence to indicate a trend. How did you go about kind of deciding what to look at?
Well, that's why we turned to these applications. And we know, based on what we saw with Sandy Hook, that the problems continue, and which is why you're seeing requests for additional grants. So it's not unusual. Broward and Santa Fe received about $1 million each after the shootings. It's not unusual for them to go back and ask for additional funding. We saw that with Sandy Hook. I think in the aftermath of the shooting, they received about $6.4 million with these particular grants. These grants are called Project Serve, which stands for School Emergency Response to Violence. They started in 2001, and they were used in the aftermath of September 11th to help some schools. But they can also be used for disasters and school shootings, suicides, suicide clusters, and unfortunately, they were used in these shootings after these shootings to help the schools recover.
So, Nicole, ultimately, I guess, what can school districts do to better help students deal with this trauma? What have you uncovered as far as the steps that other school districts around the country can employ?
Well, I did speak to a psychologist about this, and one hopeful thing was that she said that there can be healing in the aftermath. And we learned from the Santa Fe document that a lot of students are seeking help. Same thing in Broward. They are seeking help. What the psychologist told me was that if they're getting help with someone who is schooled in trauma, that can be beneficial, not necessarily to bring closure, but to help them integrate this horrible experience as part of their lives.
All right, Nicole
Really important.
Gaudiano, thank you so much for sort of reminding us that this trauma doesn't last a year, doesn't last 2 years. I mean, this is something that these children carry for a lifetime. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you so much for having me.